Hello, I'm Darrell Gunter, your host for Leadership with Darrell W. Gunter on WSOU 89.5 FM and streaming on the net at WSOU.net. Well, I'm so pleased to have back in our studio my favorite guest, my most beautiful niece, Dr. Saliha Nelson, who is the founder of Urgent Inc. and now Urgent Academy. Saliha, welcome to the program.
Thank you, thank you. And since you already said that I'm your niece and you're my favorite uncle, so there we go.
Okay, it's on the record.
It's on the record.
So, share with our audience before we dive into Urgent Inc. and Urgent Academy. Share with our audience your background, and also after your background, if you could say how you came to start Urgent Inc.
Well, first, I am not the founder of Urgent Inc., but definitely Urgent Academy. But I came on very early during Urgent Inc. Urgent Inc. was founded in 1994. We just finished celebrating our 30-year anniversary.
Wow.
And I began with the organization in 1999. So I started out as a volunteer. It was still a very grassroots volunteer-led organization.
Mhm.
And I wasn't too long out of undergrad and was looking for a job. I just moved to Miami and really couldn't find one. So I said, hey, why don't I start volunteering? I liked what the organization was doing at the time and thought I could be helpful. And,
Uh-huh.
25 years later, I'm still here.
There you
So,
and
um,
tell us about
but yeah.
education, prior to Urgent Inc.
Yeah, so I did my undergrad at Northwestern University in Evanston, and I studied education and social policy.
Mhm.
Didn't really know what all that meant back then, but have come to understand what I was learning about. And then about, wow, 2010, I went back to get my master's in education
Mhm.
with a focus on community and social change, which is under the discipline of community psychology. So that's a little different than sociology because you're looking at how um, collective organizations and communities make decisions, influence change, and influence the culture. And then decided to go back to school once again in, wow, 2019, right before COVID hit, because we at Urgent Inc. were talking about, we wanted to look at what was going on in education and see how we could make a big difference.
Mhm.
And so I just didn't want to start a school without knowing more, even though all my degrees are in education. I said, you know what, I really want to learn more about what we should be doing. What's the research saying? What are the best practices out there? And so when we form our school, when we design the school, I wanted to say we had the most up-to-date information. And so I took myself back to school at the University of Miami to get my doctorate in applied learning sciences. And people say, well, what in the world is applied learning sciences? Well, we looked at three things, assessment and evaluation, designing learning environments, and how people learn. And so those three things put together, how can you optimize learning? So you're not only looking at the individual, but you're looking at the environment, and then you're also assessing
Mhm.
how and if people are learning and what are some of the ways that you can do that. And it was a great program for all those thinking about going back to school. I recommend it. Um, great folks over there, and made it through even through COVID. So that was a challenge, but it actually allowed me to focus more on what I was studying. So it all worked itself out.
Beautiful. Wow. And so now, um, before we jump into Urgent Academy, Urgent Inc., you have been doing some phenomenal programs for years around STEM, around audio, media, video. tell us about the programs at Urgent Inc.
Well, we are a creative youth development nonprofit. And so that means we look at the intersection between youth development and the creative process
Okay.
and how we can help young people develop, but using their creativity as a tool. And so the tools that we use on that side are film, photography, design, and even entrepreneurship. So those are the four buckets that we primarily work in. Um, we start in kindergarten and we move through college now, actually. So after school programs, summer camps, and then when we get to the high school level, we introduce internships, pre-apprenticeships, and apprenticeships in media arts and creative technologies. And so in the early years, it's just about exposure and experience. You know, they get to just dabble into a lot of different things. It's all about just fostering that creativity and curiosity. In the middle school years, you know, those middle schoolers have a lot to say. So it's about how can we create pathways for them to create meaningful content using their creativity. And so to date, we've helped young people produce about, I think, 10 to 12 comic books now that we have out, where the young people come up with the characters, the storyline, um, influence the graphics. And then because of the entrepreneurship piece, they also get to go out several times a year and set up their tables to sell. And
Wow.
so it's always exciting to see young people say, wow, people will buy our stuff. I'm like, yeah, they sure will. So, you know, it's an empowering experience. And then in high school, we introduce the film photography, another level of entrepreneurship and design. And so if I'll toot our horn, over the last 6 years, we've really been able to improve the quality of the film program, you know, thanks to our film manager, Joey Ashley. He's done a great job taking this program to another level, where now every year our young people's work gets submitted into film festivals, they win awards, recognition. And a couple years ago, we were also selected because of our apprenticeship program to be a creative agency for NBC Universal. And so we were able to produce a national commercial with one of our apprentices directing his first national commercial that streamed on Peacock. So we were very happy about the quality and level of ethic and talent that our young people have really committed to build their skills under the leadership of our internal team, but also through the help of our industry professionals that we bring on board. So
Ooh,
it's growing. We're very proud of what the work is accomplishing and how the young people are using these skills, not only to pursue, you know, creative careers, but they're learning those durable skills, those workplace success skills that they can really translate to anywhere, you know, communication, collaboration, working in teams, decision making, problem solving, all of those things are essential when you're creating media content. You know, if one person falls down, it's like, what? You know, and you get that immediate feedback loop. We got to do that again. That didn't hit right. So and so you get used to, you know, getting that immediate feedback on course correction without taking offense, right? And that's a skill. A lot of people can't take, you know, any form of criticism without, you know,
right.
walking away or blowing up. And so it's a testament to having those safe, low risk opportunities for young people to practice the skills that they need in today's world.
Wow. That's huge. You know, I don't know if I know I've introduced your daughter to Pete Chapman when she was out in LA.
Mm,
But have I ever mentioned Pete Chapman to
I
you?
don't think so.
Pete Chapman, dear friend of mine, he's a director in Hollywood. Back in the day, I met him when he was doing a small film. He raised $500,000 to do a film called Premium.
Hmm.
And Zoe Saldana was the actress in the movie.
Wow.
And he did it in New Jersey. This is when I was living in South Orange. And I regret not going to the movie set. He invited me because, Deb and I had, were one of the investors. We had a small little piece that we invested, but
Mhm.
he's doing quite well. And I got to make sure that after this, I introduce you to Pete, because you name a TV show that's on TV, he's been a director of it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I would love an introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. So now let's dive into Urgent Academy. So, what is the secret sauce of Urgent Academy?
The secret sauce.
When I
Wow.
say the secret sauce, I'm talking about you because you got this program that you pull together based upon
Yeah.
your knowledge, skills, and experience. But I think it's only fair to let the audience know that you're the oldest of four and how you managed that household when your mom was at work. But you were always very kind, you know, but 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 you knew who was in charge. You're very kind, but you're firm. But so you had that. So let's talk about your program that you have there at Urgent Inc. and how it's different from the current K through 12 that we have in the public school system.
Yeah. So Urgent Academy is untraditional, but we are not alone in what we're doing. Been able to learn from two aspirational organizations that really were key influencers of putting the theory and research into practice. And so, give a shout out to Big Picture Learning and the high tech high schools. Both of those organizations are doing tremendous work around learner-centered education. And so when we talk about learner-centered education, it's about looking at the whole child and centering, several pillars in how you go about creating the learning environment for young people. And so one is you prioritize relationships.
Ah.
That's the first thing. You prioritize relationships. And so you really are intentional about learning who your students are, their lived experience, their allowing opportunities for their voices to be heard and influencing their learning environment.
Mhm.
And you are taking time within the school day to talk to them, not about academics, not about, you know, this and that, but about who they are as people and letting them share what's on their minds. And it could be academic, it could be social, it could be community, it could be any number of things, but relationships are at the center. And so part of our design model that we've adopted is the use of advisory. And this isn't your traditional advisory where you would, go to talk to your school counselor about, what are your goals for college. Advisory for us is an opportunity for those one-on-one conversations with students that we check in with them on a daily basis. And that's part of their school day. Also built into advisory is focusing on the emotional intelligence. So having young people practice those skills and elevating how they're feeling and putting words to that so that they can begin to articulate and communicate better with not only their peers, but their parents and in the work environment. Another key piece of learner-centered education is to help young people discover or take a deep dive into things that they're curious about. What are they wondering about? What are their interests? Um, what do they want to discover? What do they want to learn more about? And so they have an active opportunity to um, form the curriculum as part of their school day. And so that's part of the interest-driven piece of our educational model, where we seek to elevate how young people are exploring their interests. If you think about um, graduate school, right? You have by the time you get to graduate school, the expectation is that you have an interest that you want to take a deep dive on, and you get to really focus on what you care about. And because you care about it, most of the time you your aim is to do well, right?
Right.
You have a goal and intentionality about your learning that maybe did not exist before because you had to go through all the general studies piece.
Right. Right.
But, why do we need to wait till graduate school? Why do we need to wait until you have an opportunity to do a hobby or something like that, right? You can do that now. So that's what we introduce to kids that, what do you care about? What are you curious about? If you don't know, we're going to help you explore and introduce you to different things that may
Mhm.
stimulate an idea or an interest, or a light bulb may go on. And say, oh, I didn't even know I was interested in this.
Right.
So it's
Right.
all about that exposure and experience to help see what lights turn on when you introduce kids to different things. And so I have to say, a lot of kids, though, already know their interests. Oftentimes, they don't have a place for that,
Mm.
especially within the school day. And this is different from electives, right? Electives is kind of like exposure. It's preset for you. It's like you have to choose out of A, B, C. Well, we have this thing called passion projects. And
Oh.
that's time during the school day where young people make a plan to explore what they think they're passionate about. And I say what they think they're passionate about because sometimes when they dive a little deeper into it, like, oh no, I don't like this.
Oh.
I had no idea this is what I was getting myself into. So, sometimes it's about sticking with it, for 12 weeks till you're in, or,
Right. Right.
making a case for a shift, right? So, young people have an opportunity to explore their passions and create a project around that.
Mhm.
Then they have to present that to
Right.
community.
Right.
Um, and what the teacher does is supports that passion project by saying, okay, hey, this is what you're exploring. Um, these are the skills that you need to work on. So
Right.
we're going to build that into your project. So if they need more practice writing, then part of their project development is going to include more writing. If they need to work on research, then the teacher's going to work with them to do more, help them do more research as part of that project development. So they undergird that with their academic skills. So we talked about relationships through advisory. We talked about learner-centered education that's developed through passion projects.
Hmm.
Um, Another ingredient to the secret sauce would be project-based learning. And so the key thing about project-based learning is that you start with a question, a curiosity. And then based on your perspective or your interest, you get to explore that answer, how to answer that. Because one thing that traditional testing doesn't do is it doesn't allow for novelty. And what I mean by novelty is that there's usually more than one answer to a question. And so more than one right answer, right? And so through project-based learning, young people discover there's more than one way to get to the end.
Right.
And they have to struggle a little bit because they haven't started with all the information. So
Hmm.
it's not like the teacher is doing direct instruction, taking a test, and then you do a project, right? It's about you're struggling, trying to figure out what this project is going to be to answer this question using your, ingenuity, your innovation, your skills, your ask for help, right? Um, and see what comes up at the end. And everyone is looking at taking on parts of that project from a different standpoint. So that is a way to solve problems that mirror the real world more so, right? Because once you get to a certain point, it's all about using your creativity to solve a problem, to create a new possibility, to innovate.
Right.
And so young people are now able to explore that right now, as opposed to coming to the workplace where your supervisor says, oh, they give you a bottom line instruction, say, okay, I need this done. And if you're from a traditional mindset because of your education, you're waiting for all the steps.
Right. Right.
Step one, step two, step three. And if I haven't given you all the steps, you're looking at me confused,
Right.
right?
Right.
But if you go through our process, you're going to not need all the steps. You're going to say, I know how to get myself to the end. I know when I need to ask for help. I know when I need to consult. I know how to do research. And so you're going to be able to draw on all those skills to really be a self-starter, but also you're going to understand how important it is to ask for help, get your peers involved, get your supervisor involved. And so you get to practice that. Um, the other thing that we, is part of our like ingredients as we're kind of mixing the bowl up
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
is our adoption of what we call, and we got this from, our big picture learning people, is leave to learn. And so that means that they're not only learning in the classroom, they're learning out in the community with our community partners, and they're taking on projects as part of that experience. So it's about how we can connect the dots for folks saying, this is why it's important to know this, and this is why it matters in this context. And so as part of that process, they not only get to interact with their teachers, but they're getting to interact with other professionals out in the community that's in their community, right? And so now it's not, these buildings and these institutions don't look foreign to the kids like, oh, I'm scared to go in there. Like, no, I worked there for 12 weeks, working on a project, or I'm over here and I know so-and-so because I had to go ask him a question. I had to film him for my documentary about ABC. And so it's really about increasing the social capital of our kids, because they're going to be able to draw upon folks that also want to help them succeed, right? And so those pieces are important. I also want to say that we are not adverse to technology.
Hmm.
Technology is something that is important, and we want to make sure that our young people know how to use the tools that are available. Because if they don't know how to use the tools that are available, then it's like you're going to show up to a drag race on a horse, right?
Right.
So we want our folks to show up, in, the fastest car possible.
Right.
And they're not going to be able to drive a car if they've only been driving a horse. And so that's why um, introducing them to technology is so important, because it has changed the landscape. It's a disruptor for education right now.
Hmm.
And if you shy away from it, folks won't be prepared. You're
Right.
just not going to be prepared to compete. You just can't, because you have to be able to manipulate the new tools to be efficient, to be fast. At the same time, you also have to know about discernment, right? You have to know when things don't look right, right? And you got to know it just enough to be like, I think ChatGPT is lying to me right now. So,
Good point. Good point.
so you have to, and that comes from having, practicing discernment. What does that mean? What does that look like to be a critical thinker?
Hmm.
To double check your sources, to investigate things and make up your own mind, not just believe what folks are telling you,
Hmm.
but looking and say, how can we know that this is, more of the truth than what we got this first go around. So those are some of the items, some of the ingredients of our secret sauce. We have the tech piece, we have the arts piece, because we have the whole career and technical education track. So before, when I told you at Urgent Inc., we were just doing the film and
Hmm.
piece at high school. Now we've shifted that down in the school. So the middle schoolers are actually getting exposed to that now. So they're
So
getting a jump on that.
For
Mhm.
Urgent Academy, what grades do you have?
Middle school. Yeah, middle school. Sixth grade, sixth, seventh, and eighth. So
Six. Okay.
um, this year we have sixth and seventh graders. And so they're being introduced to the film program.
Hmm.
So I'm curious to see what I haven't seen any of their final projects
Okay.
yet, but we have our Passion Project Expo in a couple of weeks. I hear I'm gonna be pleasantly surprised on what these innovators have come up with. So I'm excited about that. So I think I've hit all the pieces of our
Fantastic pieces,
design
really.
model.
I'm really seriously, I'm really blown away and just so impressed with what you're talking about, because you're talking about social styles. You're talking about Daniel Goldman in emotional intelligence. You're talking about people being empathetic, and and people being able to take advice constructively. I mean, you're teaching them these great skills at such a young age that as they as grow through the academy and then go to high school and college, they're going to be ahead of their peers, which is a good thing, because you're developing these very young minds and these young leaders.
Absolutely. And going back to like when we're the three pillars of learning sciences, you have the assessment, the content, like how the content is being learned, and then the environment. So wanted to make sure I touched on, well, how do we actually know the kids are learning anything? Like all of this sounds like really pie in the sky, but if kids are not taking a test, how do you know if they're actually learning? So we have adopted what we call authentic assessment. And so authentic assessments or a performance-based assessment, depending on kind of what angle you want to
Hmm.
look from, is really the proof of learning. It's applied learning. So it's not just about taking a test, but it's about how are you applying that in a real context? How do we actually know that you know what 1/4 is? Because we said, okay, here, go bake a cake, but you didn't know how to measure. Like you passed the test on what 1/4 is, the word problem and everything, you were fine. But then we gave you the cake box. What happened? Right? So it's about, I did, 1 tablespoon of
Right.
salt versus 1 teaspoon. Oh, there's a difference there, right? So you see, so you see how when you take information and you put it in a real world context and what the proof of that is, how much did they actually understand? And through experience and trial and error, you're like, oh, these are why this knowledge is important. And so the other thing about taking grades out of the equation is, well, some kids really aren't motivated by grades.
Right.
They'll be like, oh, a C is fine, a D is passing,
Hmm.
it's whatever. But if they really want to eat that cake, I think they're going to get the measurements right. So it's about changing that motivation to say, what do we care about, and making that part of the context for their assessment of learning. For example, if we know that every 12 weeks, because we're on a trimester, we have presentations of learning, as opposed to they get a narrative report card with our specs for success, which is 8 learning domains.
Hmm.
They have to be able to talk about what they've learned. And so our 8 domains are quantitative reasoning, qualitative reasoning, social reasoning, skills, personal qualities. Um, and they had to be able to talk about those things
Right.
and provide evidence. So what's in your learning portfolio that says that I've demonstrated progress in this area? And it's not in front of just your peers or your teachers, it's in front of your family, it's in front of community that's invited to participate and give some feedback. And so that ups the ante, right? It's not a piece of paper that you just shove in your backpack and keep going. No, it's
So
about
we're
this is
gonna have,
what we're doing.
we're going to have you come back, because we're out of time.
Oh, wow.
But real quick, where can people make donations to get more information about Urgent Academy?
Well, they can find us online at urgentacademy.org. We're also on Instagram. My Instagram is a little pitiful, but they can find us easily on the web on Instagram. We do have a donate button. And if they know of any young people that are looking for a smaller learning community that centers young people and really elevates their talents and skills and wants to build from there, please share. We are enrolling now for the fall.
Very good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Dr. Saliha Nelson, my beautiful niece, for coming on our program to talk about Urgent Academy. And we want to wish you to have a very good day. But remember, leadership begins with you.
Are we off?